As we come to the end of our time together in this course, I want to look back on a few key moments in the history of the church in order to look forward to what the future of the church might hold. And let me begin by making some observations about the early church. This is the church from starting in Acts and going for the first couple hundred years. One of the key aspects about the early church was that those Christians continually faced persecution. While at the very start they enjoyed some of the protections that Judaism had in the Roman Empire. Judaism had some special privileges. They were allowed to continue with their religious traditions, sort of this niche carved out by the Roman Empire. And Christianity, at the very beginning, was seen as part of Judaism and enjoyed those privileges, some of those protections. But soon it became seen as a separate sect, a separate religious movement. And the early Christians faced persecution. They faced a lot of hardship. They were they didn't have any power in culture. They existed on the fringes of the society. Now, fast forward to the year 312. Rome is under the ruler of the Emperor Constantine. And in 312, Constantine defeated his arch rival Maxentius in a battle on the edges of Rome. And just prior to, on the night before, Constantine had this dream, and he dreamed that there was this cross, and they went out and he had this victory. And as a result, he summoned the Christian priests to learn more about who this God was. And one author says his response to their instruction, to the priest's instruction, was so positive that he admitted the priest to his entourage, and then he proceeded in the Edict of Milan in 313 to legalize Christianity. And he restored the properties that had been confiscated, and he gave it a privileged position in the empire. Now, Christianity wasn't the official religion of the empire, but it was now advantageous to be a Christian. Whereas up to this point Christians had faced persecution, they faced hardship. Now, under Constantine, the tables were turning. As the 4th century progressed, Constantine and his successors actually offered incentives for people to become Christians. And it was easier to get certain positions in the government. There were economic benefits. And as a result, the numbers of Christians in the empire swelled. And actually, then a couple hundred years later, under Justinian, conversion to Christianity actually became mandatory in 529. It was compulsory. All infants had to be baptized. Conversion was mandatory. And Christendom, Constantinianism, Christendom, those terms are used sort of interchangeably, was in full swing. Constantinianism refers to this shift coming from Constantine, where the church and the state sort of start to form this partnership. Christendom is a similar concept, often used interchangeably, of where Christianity holds this place of power and influence in the center of culture. Now, what I just described was going on in the church in the West, and I want to be sure to locate that in a broader narrative that the church in other parts of the world had a different history. So, for example, the Martoma Church in India, founded by the Apostle Thomas in AD 52, there were other things going on. In the Eastern Orthodox Church, the Northern African Church, there were other things going on. So I want to acknowledge that. But this was happening in the church in the Roman Empire, and had influence in the church in the West. Okay, so under Constantine, the church gets these special privileges, and you have a trajectory here in the church in the West where the church becomes more powerful, more important at the center of culture. Now let's go to, I just want to touch on a few significant things. This isn't a full history of the church, but let's go to the 16th century and the Reformation. By this point in the West, the church and the state were very intertwined. The king or the governor of an area was the one who appointed the bishop and the priests to the churches in that area. All people in a geographic region were considered Christians. And then with the Reformation, Martin Luther and the Reformers, now the rulers in some regions were now appointed by Protestants instead of Catholics. And so if a ruler in one area was now Protestant, then the bishops and the priests who were appointed were now Protestant. And everyone in that geographic region was assumed to be Protestant. So the Reformation changed sort of the flavor from Catholic to Protestant in some areas, but it didn't change this fundamental, this marriage that occurred, that was in place between church and state, and the significant influence that the state had in the life of the church. All infants were still baptized under the magisterial reformers, and there was a fundamental divide, not between church and state, but between clergy and laity that existed. Now, some things were going on. There were other things going on at that time. The radical reformers, the Anabaptist tradition that my own denomination, the Mennonite Church, descends from, called into question this marriage of church and state, and was very much against the state being able to appoint pastors to congregations. The radical reformers, the Anabaptists, said no, the local churches should be able to hire and fire their own pastors. But the broader scope of things, in the broader Reformation, that wasn't the case, and there remained this very cozy relationship between the church and the state. So